Welcome to Elimj ChatShow, a platform where we empower our community and various communities out there. A platform that will give people voices to speak and share how they can empower our community. In today's episode, I'll be having Jason Hales. He is an holistic estate planner. He's going to be sharing tons of tips with us here. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Liz.
Thank you very much for coming to our Empowerment Chat Show.
Thank you for inviting me. My
Thank you, Jason. I've heard a lot about what you are doing in our community. So today I would like you to share something with us. However, before we dive into that, I would love you to please introduce yourself to our community here. Thank you.
Thank you. So, as you know, my name is Jason Hales, and I've coined the phrase holistic estate planner. What does that mean? It means I do wills, lasting powers of attorney, trusts, but I also do insurances like life insurance, critical illness cover, income protection. And I combine all of those to give a more in-depth protection approach for clients and helping them to pass on legacy to family.
Thank you very much. Thank you for introducing yourself to our platform. Today, we're going to be talking about something spectacular. And the title of what we're going to be sharing today is Turning Property into a Legacy and the Smart Planning for Landlord and Homeowners. Relating to this wonderful topic, I've got about 5 questions for you, and I'm going to share one with you in a minute. Is that okay?
Absolutely, no problem.
Thank you very much for that. So, my question to you, Jason, is when you speak about turning property into legacy, what does that mean for landlord and for homeowners? Can you give us more insight to that, please?
Well, I think for quite a number of years now, most of my more profitable clients have not been doing well just through the day job, through earning a salary. They're doing well because they've invested in property in some way, shape, or form. There is many different strategies that they might be looking at, but at some point they've bought a property, realized there's some equity in that property, extracted some of that equity and reinvested. So that might be conventional buy to let, or that might be serviced accommodation, or multiple houses of occupancy. Clients that I know that are doing well and who are starting to build a legacy for their children and family, it's been through property investment. Because there's one thing that we do know is that the value of property does go up over time, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. So, looking at what you've just said just now, do they really come to you, or how do you find this client to educate and empower them regarding what you've just mentioned?
I don't educate them on getting involved in property. Most of the clients I have are already in property or they're looking to get into property. I support a few property meetings. I'll go to those meetings once a month, help set up, and we'll learn from different people who are invested in property. I might invite people to those meetings so they can learn. But also things have changed since my day. Now there's so many more youngsters who are looking at the investment strategy of property at a young age. So they're trying to learn about how to get involved, how to start up a property investment business. And there's different courses and training for people to start diving in and learning from other people's experience. I can guide people in the right direction. And what I say to people is start as you mean to go on. I think many of the older school investors, they just looked at it as, a way to make an income. They call it financial freedom, don't they? But if you know that this is going to be your business, then you should start to look at the medium to long term. What does this business look like 10, 15, 30 years time? Starting to look at what your exit strategy might be. How do you start to save on perhaps different taxes like inheritance tax? How do I structure my business in the most tax efficient way now going forward that it's beneficial for me and my family. So yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much for throwing more light into that. I think that's quite interesting. And I'm sure a lot of people will find this really interesting. So, my second question for you is relating to smart planning. What are the key steps that landlords should take in order to ensure their property or wealth is passed on smoothly to, I'll say, next generation? Any thoughts?
I think there's several things that you need to consider. One of them, I'm a big fan of life insurance, right? Because I think if there's a couple of things that we definitely know is going to happen in the world is death and taxes, right? Death is guaranteed at some point. We hope it doesn't come soon, but we know it's going to come at some point. So putting in place life insurance for me is critical for anybody thinking about an investment strategy, because your whole business is about getting debt from the bank. So if you have debt, if something happens to you, then it will be a good idea to make sure that debt can be paid off. Now, God forbid, if you and your partner invested in property and something happens to one of you and you pass away, wouldn't it be a great scenario to leave the other person with a debt-free portfolio? Because that way they can increase their income coming into the monthly household. So it's going to be beneficial for them. So getting rid of debt if one person passes away is vitally important. Whether you're a seasoned investor or starting out in property investments, that's one thing. The other thing is structuring your portfolio in a way that might reduce taxes. The most important one that I deal with is inheritance tax. If you know that you're going to be buying assets, you know that the more assets you have, the larger your inheritance tax bill is going to be, right?
Exactly.
So it makes sense to start your investing in the right type of structure that is going to be the most tax efficient on an ongoing basis. So that's another smart way of getting involved in the property arena and looking at what your medium to long term goals may be. The other one is getting all your legal paperwork in place. So if you're doing stuff with other people, investing with other people, that might be joint ventureships. So getting your legal paperwork sorted, because we never know what happens along the route of life, right? And if anything does happen, be it death, be it illness, you want to be able to make sure that things can go as smoothly as possible. And that might be having your legal paperwork done properly. Another thing that many investors don't consider is something called a lasting power of attorney. A lasting power of attorney is an official document that gives somebody else the authority to act on your behalf if you are unable to act for yourself. That might be due to an accident or a sickness, for example. So, once again, if you can imagine, if your goal is to be in charge of a large portfolio of assets, that means you're going to be dealing with estate agents, you're going to be dealing with customers, you're going to be dealing with banks, you're going to be dealing with finance brokers, you're going to be dealing with all sorts of professionals. So it's important that you make sure that you've actually got your house in order with the right type of documents.
Oh my goodness. Just hearing this from you kind of like opened my eyes a little bit to also reality of life. I'm from West Africa.
Okay.
And there is one thing which is in Nigeria, people usually say, I call it lack of awareness and a little bit of denial of reality of life. So say for instance, someone is hearing what you're just sharing here to say, listen, life could just turn around for one or two reasons. So for that reason, you have to ensure that you plan very well. So when an African person hears, someone from my country, I'm just saying from my own perspective, They will tell you, oh, God forbid, it's not going to happen. However, we can't really stop life from taking its own shape.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people who don't go to church, and I know people who do go to church and believe in God. And at the end of the day, we don't know what's in place for us, what that plan is. People can leave us on this planet through accidents, through sickness, through old age. Yeah. But we never know what that plan is. You could be the healthiest person, go to the gym regular basis, eat healthily, but something can still go wrong. You could still have an accident. You could still have an illness. Yeah. So whatever God's plan is God's plan. Be prepared for, for whatever God throws at you.
Wow, be prepared. I love that powerful phrase. Thank you for sharing all you've just talked about. I just want to quickly take you back into something you mentioned. You said starting the business in a smart way. Like, when it's a smart way, do you have any one, say, one strategy you just want to share?
If you are looking at the investment in property, for example, I would say that many people my age and plus would have perhaps bought property in their own name. That would have been the first thing they have done. But actually, today, if investing in property is a strategy that you want to do as a business, then you should do that straight off as a professional business, as a limited company, because it is a business, right? If you're trying to treat it as a business, then that should be done as a limited company, generally speaking. So you should seek advice from an accountant, first of all. But starting off professionally, if that's what you want to do, is definitely a smart way of getting involved in property investing.
Thank you for sharing that. I think I've heard this from several people talking about it, but someone also mentioned that, of course, you did finish your phrase, your sentences there saying, talk to an accountant. One thing I heard was, it's always good to start as a, I can't remember what it was, SAS something. So sometimes, yeah, if you start as a limited liability company, there's a high chance you pay. I'm not sure if it's something tax. I've forgotten the tax again. So someone said starting as a trust, putting it under trust. I can't remember what it was, like a SA SAS or something. I've forgotten.
Yeah, that's not quite the case. I think that anyone who's getting involved in property investing should seek professional advice. There's different ways of investing in property, and different things will suit different people. Sitting down with a professional and telling them about your goals are, what you're looking to achieve, and how you want to protect those goals, that will be the important thing. And then you can get advice about what the best structure and so forth might be.
Thank you so much for that share. That's very insightful. My other question quickly here is relating to inheritance tax and a little bit of pitfall, I'll say. So the question goes, inheritance tax is often a major concern for a lot of property owners, people as well. So what's the common mistake that you see landlord make, and how can a smart planning prevent them from falling into that pit hole?
That's a good question. I realized many years ago that with a lot of landlords, the main thing they're concerned about is income tax, how much tax they're going to pay on their portfolio. Another tax is capital gains tax. That's looking at whatever the value of their portfolio they bought it for as it grows. If you sell, there's something called a capital gains tax to pay. Another one is something called stamp duty. If they're buying a property, there's some tax to pay. And then the last one is inheritance tax. Inheritance tax is almost the forgotten tax. And the reason being is because, generally speaking, you don't have to pay it until you've passed away. And when I say generally speaking, if you're a couple and investing together, even if one person dies, there's no inheritance tax between married people. So there's no tax there. You would only be paying the inheritance tax on the second person to die. So you can see that it's often something that is forgotten. But what I try and say to my clients is Every 3 years, you should be looking at your position, looking at the value of your assets, the current reliefs available, and understanding where your inheritance tax position is.
Mm.
Because if you understand where that inheritance tax position is, you could potentially put in place a life insurance policy that can pay that inheritance tax bill. So if you are unfortunate enough to pass away earlier than you thought you may be, because of life's events, then if that tax bill catches your family, because it's not you that pays for it, then life insurance is a great product to pay that bill. But also, as time goes on, what most landlords seem to forget is that they collect all of these assets. But actually, when you're in your 60s or 70s, for example, you might need to consider, what am I going to do with all of these assets? What is my main purpose now? Is my main purpose to hand down all of these assets to my children?
Mm.
Yeah, over the long term as a legacy plan. And if that was the case, then you should have structured it better 20, 30 years ago. Or is it a case of you need that portfolio to produce an income to maintain a particular lifestyle?
Okay.
So if you need, let's say you discover at later life, you need £4,000 a month to be able to pay your bills, have a little holiday now and then, maintain your car, etc. Looking at your portfolio and saying, okay, how does this portfolio going to generate that £4,000? Is there assets that I potentially could give away to children, for example, even if I have to pay some tax on that giving away of that property? But if I survive a certain period of time, 7 years, then that value of that property could be completely outside of my estate for inheritance tax purposes. So it means that you're starting your legacy planning by helping the children or grandchildren either get on the property ladder by buying their own property or starting an investment property. And you're then reducing your own inheritance tax liability. So therefore the children can pay less tax. So there's many different strategies of how you can reduce your inheritance tax bill. Some people even call it a voluntary tax because the fact that there's so many ways that you can mitigate inheritance tax. Some people say if you're paying inheritance tax, that's because you've not done your planning along the way.
You know why I said, what I'm hearing here, I don't think I've heard it in school before, except if I'm falling asleep or something.
No, they're not teaching that in school. No, you're absolutely right. I meet seasoned investors who own portfolios of multi-million pounds. And when I ask them what is the inheritance tax calculation or what their inheritance tax position looks like, they haven't got a clue. It's not on their radar. It's not something that they've been thinking about.
Thank you very much. Oh my goodness. I can sit with you all day just to hear all this. Okay, we've got another question for you. This is relating to holistic approach, how you do things. So, as an holistic estate planner, what do you look at in property outside the bigger picture of it, of someone's life, and why is the holistic view so important when building a legacy?
I'll give you an example of one of my clients. I had a client come to me many years ago, and he came to me to do his life insurance. And he said to me that he was putting this life insurance in place for the benefit of his children. He did the life insurance and everything was going fine. I had not spoken to him for a number of years. Last year, I got a phone call from a stranger. That stranger was his wife, who found my telephone number amongst his paperwork. She said that he had passed away, and the life insurance policy I had put in place was around £300,000. Now, he had done his will, but he had done his will with somebody else, right? Now, the life insurance wasn't in trust, right? So he had not done anything to protect that life insurance. That life insurance dropped into his estate. So when he done his will, the life insurance, instead of going directly to the children, it goes into his estate. His estate is decided by his will. He had left the wife the main residence where they were living. He'd left her some cash. They had joint bank accounts. So the joint bank accounts, that cash was now hers. But he'd also left a percentage of his estate to his siblings. The life assurance that he did not put in trust formed part of that estate to his siblings. So his wife was now fighting her husband's family to get this £300,000. And that's because there wasn't a complete holistic approach that was looked at. He'd done his planning very separately. He'd done his life insurance separately, and he'd done his will planning separately. Imagine if he could have looked at that on a more holistic basis, then maybe it would have been brought to light that life assurance wasn't done in the best way. Maybe that life assurance could have been done in trust for the benefit of the children. Maybe he would have written his will differently to make sure that the children was looked after. So speaking to clients and having a more holistic approach that covers not only where are my assets going to go, but when those people get the assets, how is that money looked after? You know, if I have this journey, this plan of producing a portfolio over the next 20 years, what if something happens and life goes wrong? What if the dreaded heart attack, cancer, strokes, etc. happen along the way? How do I make sure that my plan isn't derailed in that meantime? How do I make sure that if I couldn't work within this business for 12 months, 24 months, that it's not derailed? How do I make sure that my tenants are still happy? How do I make sure that the bank is still happy? Because the banks still want their money, right? So thinking about planning on a more holistic basis does make sure that you've crossed many of the T's and dotted many of the I's, not just in the what if things go wrong, but what do I want to happen to this legacy, this stuff that I'm building, and making sure it goes to the right people in the right way.
Thank you. My goodness. It's like, oh my God. I'm like, oh, I gotta give you a phone call tomorrow.
It does make you think about your own mortality, and
Yeah.
it does make you think about your own planning.
Mhm.
I think one of the most important things that we could do in the world is bring children, right? And once we brought children into the world, our perspectives have changed, right? We now want to help take care of them. We now want to make sure that what we're building can be handed down to them. We want to make sure that if my child is under the age of 18, if they had to be dropped off to an aunt or an uncle to live with them for 10 years, how would that person financially look after my child that I've dropped on their doorstep if I'm not here? How do they feed them, clothe them, help them to get through university, start a business? How do they even house them? Is there going to be room at Auntie's house for you to have a bedroom if you were just dropped off there for the next 10 years? These are the things that we need to consider. And you need to consider that whether you're a property investor or whether you're a family person. Doesn't make any difference. It's still the same thing. It's all about putting the planning in place. We have something now, the blended family, right?
Yes.
So back in the day, someone would stay with someone for 40, 50 years. But today, life is a little bit different, right? We
Yep.
put up with less. We might move on to different people. So you might have children from a previous relationship. You might have a partner that is not the parent to your children. So imagine if you've invested in these properties, who comes first? If something happens to me, I now have different people that I need to try and look after. I need to look after my partner because we were building something together. I need to look after perhaps any children that we may have together. I may need to look after children that came before my partner. So that's a really holistic approach, right? That is, how do I look after these different people if anything happens to me? Because if I don't do that planning and I go, I'm just going to leave everything to my partner, is my partner going to maintain a relationship with my children in 20 years after I've gone? If she's got her own children, will the assets that I've built that have now gone to her, will that go to her children and not my children? So thinking about your planning on a very holistic basis in today's world is massively important. You're thinking now, haven't I?
Oh, yes, it got me thinking. I'm going to come back. Thank you very much for this. One thing I want to quickly ask you is, finally, Jason, the question here is, how does estate planning empowers landlord and their family? And what is the legacy message you had like to leave with our audience today?
That's a great question. Many years ago, I started doing a show called the Landlord and Investment Show. The owners of that show are now my clients and friends. When that show started, I assumed that many of the landlords had it sussed. I thought that their planning was all in place. And I thought, oh, they're good. You know, they own multiple properties. So why would they need little old Jason Hales, right? But it's only when I started to engage with them that it soon came apparent that they got involved in property to replace the day job. They wanted to produce an income. That was the key reason why they wanted to do it. Many of them had not thought about what happens to all of this stuff that I've built, if anything happens to me. If you ask most landlords, what do you want to happen to your properties if anything happens to you? 9 times out of 10, the answer is, I want it to be handed down to my children. Now, most landlords, very rarely do they have no debt because they've used a bank to borrow money to buy property. So if you pass away and you haven't got something like life insurance, for example, you don't own those properties. You do not own those properties. The bank still owns them. You may own them as a business, they may be rented out, but the bank can say to you at any time, listen, the person that set up this business is now gone. We need our security. We need to know, is this business going to conduct itself in the same way? Who do we go after if you stop paying for this mortgages? Who's the new people? What's your credit? What's your income like if your tenants don't pay this mortgage? So that's the one key thing that I've noticed that many of my landlords, even still today, have not done. They want the properties to be given to their children, but haven't done the necessary things to make sure that can happen. Because until you own that property 100% unencumbered, we call it, with no mortgage, that's the only way that you fully own it. Otherwise, the bank owns it, not you. So that's a way to hopefully empower your listeners and empower people to go, he's absolutely right. This stuff produces a great income, but what do I now need to look at to make sure that this stuff is handed to the people in the right way that I want it to be handed to?
Our signature question here, which is our empowerment question. Jason, before we wrap up, on the Empowerment Chat show, we always finish with a signature question. And it's about empowering voices, transforming community, and every guest that we have here. So the question is, how do you use your voice and expertise to empower our community and beyond?
That's a good one. I like that one. So I've just joined a new firm, right? And they said to me, Jason, how do you get your business? And I said, I do all sorts of things to get business. One of the things I do is presentations in my community and in church groups. I did one in Haringey recently to nearly 60 or 70 ladies in our community from all different walks of life. And they were all at different stages. Yeah. But nobody was talking to them about, you know, they didn't know what inheritance tax was. Yeah. They've come to this country, they've worked hard, their views have been pay off your mortgage, and they've done that. So they're living in these houses that are now gone up in value. And some of them are doing okay. Some of them are asset rich and cash poor. So across the board, there was so many people that needed advice. So I do shows, I do events in fates, I do food events, and they don't expect to see someone talking about insurance and wills. I say to people, look, I'm not going to be talking to you at a fun event about death, right? But if it's something that you need to do that you haven't thought about, write down your name and number and let's have a conversation. Because one thing I guarantee is that you will learn something in the time that we'll speak together. And whether you take action or not is entirely up to you. So that's what I try and do, is empower people and educate people. And I try and do the most depressing subject in the world with a smile on my face to make it easier for people to feel comfortable to talk about.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that. With everything you've shared here, I want to dive a little bit deeper. Is there something that made you go into this specific sector? What inspired you to choose to say, no, I want to help people?
Okay, be ready for the tears now. That's a great question. That's the question of what is my why, right? So many years ago, well, actually, I've just celebrated my daughter's 21st birthday, right? And we went out at the weekend. Now, she's doing well for herself and she's a beautiful young lady, but she was a twin. At 4.5 years of age, she lost her twin sister to cancer. When I bought my house many years ago, I took out a life insurance policy, but I also took out a critical illness policy.
Mm.
Back then, critical illness policies used to cover any children that you may have automatically. So when my daughter was diagnosed with cancer, this policy paid out.
Oh, wow.
And that money saved us. That money came in and it meant that I could spend more time with my family. Initially, it was hospital visits, Great Ormond Street, and doctors, etc. Yeah. Or even being beside the bedside when there was difficult operations or there was times of sickness. So it meant that when I wasn't earning enough through commissions, I had some of that money to fall back on.
Hmm.
And she was sick for 2 years.
Wow.
And when she eventually passed, I was able to use some of that money to pay for that funeral. And that funeral was, we had a pink casket, we had horse and carriage, and she had the most amazing send off. It was the money from that insurance policy that helped me to do that. When I saw what an insurance policy could do, that made me passionate about wanting to do that for other people. So if illness and sickness was something that affects people, that money would not be the key thing that they had to worry about in their time of family need. So that's my reasons why.
Jason. Wow. Thank you for being authentic with us here today. For using your story to touch our hearts and other people there. And I think this is really good because I'm quite certain your story which has made you to go into this sector, you must have used your skill set to help other family and I'll say other generation as well, both
Yeah,
indirectly and directly.
yeah, absolutely. And I've sold many different insurance policies, and you hope you're never going to need the critical illness policy. You hope you're never going to need the salary protection policy. You take out a life insurance policy, and I hope I'm wasting your money because if I get the phone call that somebody's passed away, I know what that money has done to change people's lives. I know what going through a critical illness feels like, and someone saying, look, I can't take away that illness, but I can give you some money to help you get through it, to pay for better treatment, to make sure that you keep the wolves from the door, that you've got heating, that you've got electricity, that you've the credit card, you haven't got to worry about the bills on a monthly basis. I know the feeling that money relieves for those households. So yeah, it makes me really passionate about it.
Wow. You know why I'm putting a full stop into this? It's like this is chapter of life, which some people don't even want to open the page,
Mm-hmm.
and it could be reality for some people.
Yeah.
How about people that think that, because listen, I told you I'm from West Africa. We have some other people that might think this is a waste of money. What would you say to them? How would you tell them to change their mindset or update their mindset in terms of this?
Yeah, and that is a good question. Do you know something? When you look at life insurance, for example, right? It's like any insurance. Somebody said to me recently, "Oh, Jason, I'm going to pay in for all of these years." Right? She took a policy to age 90, right? And she said, "What happens if I get to age 90?" And I said, "All of your money is gone." And she said, "I'm going to pay into this policy for all these years." And I said, "Yeah." And I said to her, "Do you drive?" And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "How long have you been driving?" And she said, "About 20 years." And I said, "Are you a good driver? Do you consider yourself to be a good driver?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm excellent." And I said, "But you pay car insurance every single year. And that car insurance covers your car in case anything happens, but it also covers in case you have a major accident.
Hmm,
It covers the other person.
hmm,
It covers potentially court fees and liability fees."
hmm.
Yeah. Although the government says that you have to have it in place, I know that there's been one or two incidences where somebody's crashed into my car, and I'm glad that they had car insurance because that car insurance fixed my car. You know, life is a bit of a gamble, right? We don't want to leave the planet early, but death is guaranteed. It's a certainty. So If you're unfortunate enough to leave the planet in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s, is there somebody that I want to leave a legacy to? Who is it? If my kids are doing okay for themselves, do I give my grandkids a bit of a leg up? Wouldn't it be great if there's a pot of 100,000, 200,000 for the grandkids? They want to go to uni? No problem. You can go to uni because your grandma passed away many years ago and she left a lump sum of money for you to go uni. You want to start investing in property and start a business? The bank won't lend you any money because you're young, you haven't got a good credit yet. Your grandma left you some money to start a business, to study, to learn, to grow. You want to buy a house? Yeah? Bank of mum and dad is getting very difficult nowadays. So it might be bank of grandma. If the kids don't need it, then the grandkids might need it. How are the children's children going to get on the property ladder? So we need to start thinking beyond just us. We need to start thinking about not only the next generation, but what about the generation after that? We owe it to them to do our planning now to best help those different generations. That's a must. We can't just think about ourselves and our own mortality. We've got to think about how do we start making legacy planning? Like, how do we start looking after the grandkids? Do you know when I watch Homes Under the Hammer?
Yeah.
Right? I always say, why are our people not on Homes Under the Hammer saying, my grandma left me 200, 300,000 pounds? It's us that can change that story. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much. In case people that are listening that will end up watching this, in case they want to connect with you, I'm sure you've left a lot of questions here. You can see my eyes in tears. So I'm sure people would like to connect with you, ask you questions, even if it's to book a consultation with you or talk to you over the phone or catch up with you on social media. How would you like them to connect with you?
Best thing is my mobile number because I've had it for decades. Email addresses may change, company names may change.
Yep.
My phone number has always been guaranteed the same. So the best number to get me on is 07968 259 336. I work for two different companies. One is on the insurance side, and another is on the wills and the trust and last and powers of attorney side. So the best thing to do is give me a call. We'll arrange a time to have a chat, a consultation, and see where we go from there.
Thank you very much for this, Jason. How long have you been doing this for?
I had my own firm for 15 years. I was doing insurance, life insurance, and critical illness cover. Many years ago, Royal London, the insurance company, said if you're giving customers lump sums of money if they pass away, you want to make sure that those lump sums of money go to the right hands, to the right people. They said getting involved in wills and trust planning was imperative and important to your customers. That's when I started looking at the will side of things. So I now combine those things together. So yeah, I've got lots of years of experience in helping families.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this.
It's been great.
Thank you very much, Jason, for coming to speak to us here today. You've really empowered us, and I'm sure you will be touching a lot of people's heart today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope you've enjoyed today's segment. If you are yet to follow our page, feel free to do so. And also, if you've got any specific leader, thoughtful leaders that you want us to interview on our empowerment chat show, feel free to leave that in the DM or you can put it in the chat on this platform here, and we shall take it from there. Thank you very much for tuning in today and hope to see you next time. Cheers.